Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Asher Kenwood built his dream home in the remote Colorado woods, he expected peace, not war. But when a power-hungry HOA from a nearby suburb tried to claim his land, they triggered a battle of lies, trespass, and legal firepower they never saw coming. I wasn't expecting trouble when I moved in. Hell, I'd built the damn place myself. Every poured concrete stair tread, every steel beam, every custom window, looking out over 6 acres of quiet Colorado land. My name's Asher Kenwood. I'm 37, architect by trade, founder of a small boutique design studio that handles high-end projects across the country. I've designed homes for celebrities, CEOs, and a handful of reclusive artists with bottomless bank accounts and a hatred of symmetry. But this one was mine. It sat at the edge of the old forestry boundary, way up a winding dirt road past the pine line. I bought the parcel directly from the state's forestry department long before Aspen Gate popped up nearby with its synthetic turf, pastel shutters, and compulsive regulation of mailbox sizes. My land had been untouched, undesignated, ungoverned. Exactly how I liked it. I poured everything into the house. A 2-story structure with clean, minimalist lines, slate siding, full glass walls on the southern face, and a garden styled after Kyoto's temples. Every inch of it was designed with solitude in mind. No HOA, no neighbors dropping off cookies and noise complaints, just silence and steel. For the first year, I came and went as needed. Most of my clients were out of state, so I bounced between LA and Vancouver, staying on site when I needed clarity or when burnout nipped at my heels. I didn't socialize. I didn't wave at people walking their poodles. I just worked, which is probably why no one in Aspen Gate knew who I was. They saw the house going up from afar, speculated about who was building it, and then months later noticed that some unshaven guy in a hoodie occasionally drove up in a dusty 4Runner and disappeared inside. The letter came one Monday morning in a perfectly folded, overly glossy envelope. Return address, Aspen Gate Homeowners Association. I frowned immediately. That shouldn't have been possible. Still, I opened it. Inside was a notice of violation and membership delinquency with the following demands. Submit proof of property ownership, pay 3 years of past due HOA membership dues totaling $18,000, and correct visible landscaping inconsistencies in accordance with community guidelines. Failure to comply, it warned, would result in escalation, including the involvement of local authorities. I snorted. My first reaction was amusement. The second was irritation. A quick double-check of the county GIS map online confirmed what I already knew. My parcel was not within Aspen Gate's boundaries. Not even close. I figured someone had made a mistake. So I ignored it. That was apparently the wrong move. 2 days later, I heard gravel crunch under tires. I was in the middle of welding a stair stringer in the garage when the sound reached me. I pulled off my gloves, stepped outside, and there she was. Karen. I didn't know her name yet, but the moment I saw her, I knew. The posture, the precision-cut blonde bob. The clipboard clutched like a royal scepter, and behind her, 2 rent-a-cop security guards, arms folded like they were guarding Fort Knox. She didn't walk so much as glide, her loafers untouched by dust, her eyes scanning the architecture with visible offense. "You must be the tenant," she said, without introduction. I wiped my hands on my apron. "No, I'm the owner." She raised a sculpted brow. "Of this property?" "Of course." I find that hard to believe. She pulled a paper from her clipboard. "This house is architecturally significant and appraised far beyond the means of, well, let's just say we've had impersonators in the past. If you're renting, we need contact info for the real owner." "I designed this house," I said. "Every nail, every joint. I own it outright, and I'm not part of your HOA." Karen laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "All properties within Aspen Gate are subject to the HOA. If you believe otherwise, you're misinformed." I pointed toward the tree line. "See that? Your property line ends 200 feet that way. I'm not in your fiefdom." "That's debatable," she said smoothly. "Our internal boundary overlay includes this lot. The board recently voted to expand jurisdiction." I stared at her. "You can't just vote your way onto someone else's land." Karen smiled. "You'll find that in Aspen Gate, we value order, standards. We don't allow squatters, drifters, or independent projects. It lowers values." "Lady," I said, stepping closer, "You're trespassing." Her eyes narrowed. I added, "Take your clipboard and your cosplay security and get off my property. You'll be hearing from us again." She turned on her heel. One of the guards muttered something into a radio. I watched them go, fuming, every step screaming bureaucratic menace. That evening, after checking every legal boundary twice, I installed a fresh sign at the entrance of my private drive. Private property, not part of Aspen Gate HOA. Trespassers will be filmed and prosecuted. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Friday morning, I woke to find something taped to my steel gate, an eviction notice, printed in bold red, citing violations of Aspen Gate community policy and threatening forced removal by county enforcement. Except the letterhead was wrong. The seal of the county inspector's office looked fake, wrong color, stretched font. I recognized the logo. It was Aspen Gate's own emblem, lazily pasted in. I laughed, but it was a cold sound this time. They'd gone from bluffing to forgery. They had no idea who they were messing with. It was the following Tuesday when they tried to make it real. I was in the kitchen grinding beans for my second cup of coffee when I spotted the black and white SUV crawling up my private drive through the live camera feed. At first, I assumed it was someone lost or a delivery gone rogue, but when two uniformed sheriff's deputies stepped out and adjusted their duty belts with practiced familiarity, I knew exactly who had sent them. I met them on the porch, calm, hoodie on, mug in hand. "Morning, gentlemen," I said. "Can I help you?" The older of the two stepped forward, a clipboard tucked under one arm. The younger looked like he hadn't graduated from suspicion yet. They both had body cams blinking red. "Sir, we're here to follow up on a report from the Aspen Gate Homeowners Association. They claim you may be unlawfully occupying this residence and possibly engaging in unauthorized construction." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "We have to follow up," the older one said. "Mind if we ask for some ID and proof of ownership?" "No problem." I stepped inside, returned a minute later with a tidy folder, notarized warranty deed, county property card, stamped construction permits with my architect's seal and contractor license, tax records with parcel number, and, because I'm me, screenshots of the county GIS map showing my parcel floating completely outside the blue HOA overlay. I handed it over, watching their eyebrows inch higher with each page. And just for fun, I added, tapping my phone, "Here's video footage from my property cameras. This one shows the HOA president, Karen Montrose, affixing a falsified eviction notice to my gate. You can see her matching the paper up, checking her hair in the camera reflection like it's a Vogue shoot, then peeling off her gloves and walking off like a discount Bond villain." The older deputy's lip twitched. He looked through the documents again, then turned to his partner. "Looks pretty ironclad," he said. "No red flags, not our jurisdiction, and definitely not theirs." The younger one still looked awkward. "She said you were seen entering the house late at night, through the back." I deadpanned, because I designed the house to avoid streetlight glare. "I work nights. I use the back patio. That's how I come and go. Is that illegal now?" "No, sir, just doing due diligence." "Well, since we're being thorough," I said, turning the clipboard around, "note that this eviction notice bears a forged county seal. If anyone's breaking the law, it's whoever submitted that." They made a few calls, then handed everything back. "We'll be filing this as a false report," the older deputy said, voice low. "We'll make a note about the forged document too, but off the record, watch your back. These HOA folks sometimes get real creative." "Noted. Thanks for being professional." They left without incident, but the moment they were gone, I turned and locked the door, then walked straight to my office and pulled up my archive drive. It was time to go full documentation mode. See, there's a kind of arrogance that comes from people like Karen. She didn't just dislike me. She didn't believe someone like me could possibly own something like this. The hoodie, the work boots, the solitude. It didn't fit her vision of who belongs in a $4 million house with floor-to-ceiling glass and a landscaped garden built by hand. She saw an outsider, a threat to her curated vision of affluence, and decided it had to be fake. People like Karen didn't understand that some of us build our castles instead of inheriting them. That evening, I reviewed footage. 3 nights prior, Karen had driven up to my property line at 2:43 a.m., parked, and just sat there for 10 minutes with her headlights off. Then she got out, walked along the outer fence, flashlight in hand, a slow perimeter check. She was casing the place. The next day, I posted 2 new signs: surveillance active, footage archived off-site, just to add a little chill. By Friday, she was back, but this time I caught her on the birdhouse cam. She was holding a long roll of paper, flanked by 2 guys with tablet devices. They stepped over the edge of my southern berm, clearly over the line, and started measuring. Their voices came through faintly on the parabolic mic. "He doesn't know yet, but in a month, this entire block's gonna be under us. Council's friendly. We'll rezone, push the boundary overlay, roll it through with majority vote. He won't know what hit him." I blinked. They were literally trying to annex my land. You'd think that was a joke, like some HOA fantasy about community expansion, but these people were dead serious. And I knew exactly how dangerous that kind of bureaucratic overreach could become. Zoning manipulation, tax shifts, easement claims. It was all dirty administrative warfare, so I did what any rational person would do. I called my attorney. Her name's Veronica Holt, and she's a land use shark. I'd met her during a build-out project for a celebrity winery that almost got flattened by a corrupt planning commission. She ate HOA bylaws for breakfast. I sent her everything: the forged eviction notice, the police report, the footage of the boundary breach, and the audio of Karen's takeover plan. She didn't even hesitate. "They're not just in violation," she said. "They're making themselves liable for criminal fraud and civil harassment. Let them keep going. We're going to break them in half." We agreed to start building a formal case, but quietly. Meanwhile, I installed 3 more concealed cameras, put my legal docs in a fireproof safe, and triple encrypted all video backups to an off-site server in Oregon. Karen wanted a war over who belonged in this house. She just didn't realize I'd designed the battlefield. I should have known that someone like Karen wouldn't stop just because the police told her to. She didn't seem like the kind of woman who accepted no as an answer, especially not from someone she thought didn't belong in her curated version of the world. Still, I didn't expect her to be this bold. The envelope arrived 2 days after the deputy visit, slipped into my mailbox without postage. No name, no return address, just a cheap cream-colored envelope sealed with a red sticker that tried very hard to look official. I opened it at the kitchen counter with my coffee steaming beside me. Inside was a single printed letter, no header, no logo. "You live on the edge of a quiet and structured community. That structure is not optional. You have a choice. Submit your HOA membership agreement and pay the 3 years of retroactive dues totaling $18,000 by the 1st of next month. Or prepare for thorough reviews by county zoning, fire inspection, tax assessment, environmental compliance, and utility regulation. You may think you're above the rules. You are not. Be smart." I laughed, out loud, the kind of humorless bark that doesn't come from amusement. It came from sheer disbelief. I scanned the letter into my system, ran a forensic font match for fun. Karen used a Microsoft Word default, classic, and then sent it all to Veronica. Her reply came within 5 minutes. "That's extortion. This just became criminal. We're reporting it. Also, get cameras inside your garden and make sure all entry points are logged." I didn't need to be told twice. That afternoon, I disguised a wide-angle camera inside one of my decorative lanterns in the rock garden, mounted another in a hollowed-out bird box, and added motion sensors along the gravel path behind the koi pond. If anyone stepped onto my land again, I'd know the second their foot hit dirt. Turns out I wouldn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, just before midnight, I got a silent notification from the bird box cam. Movement. 3 figures entering through the tree line on the eastern edge. No headlights, no flashlights, just phone screens and measured steps. One of them was unmistakably Karen, tight ponytail, windbreaker zipped up like she was on a mission. The other 2 were men. One carried a tablet, the other a long measuring tape. They weren't trying to be stealthy. They knew the land was private. They didn't care. My audio rig caught everything. Karen, that lot line is completely ambiguous. I checked the records. They're outdated. If we stake the fence plan before the new overlay hearing, we can make a case for administrative jurisdiction. Man 1. Won't he contest it? Karen, he can try. But if we show this was always intended to be under community control, the county won't care, especially if we claim he's been non-compliant with zoning. Man 2. What about the police report? Karen, they won't connect the dots. And if he keeps pushing, we'll escalate. There are ways to force an inspection. I watched them for 23 minutes as they circled my side fence, marked coordinates in the dirt, took photos of my HOA intake, and measured distances from the rear wall to the property edge. They were preparing for something bureaucratic, something weaponized. By morning, I had the footage in 4 backup locations and uploaded to a private digital vault Veronica and I had access to. She took one look and called me immediately. They're preparing to claim your lot is inside an expanded HOA overlay. That's not just aggressive, that's illegal. They're fabricating proximity jurisdiction. They're measuring with the intent to mislead the zoning board. So what do? We build a legal wall so high it gives them altitude sickness. I filed 2 separate reports with the county sheriff, one for criminal trespass and another for attempted harassment and conspiracy to interfere with land use rights. I attached every clip, every transcript, and copies of the extortion letter. Then I went further. I contacted the county clerk's office and requested certified copies of every zoning hearing, parcel annexation vote, and HOA expansion request for the past 5 years. It took them 2 days, but when the packet arrived, it told me everything I needed to know. There had never been a vote to expand Aspen Gate's boundaries. They were bluffing. They were inventing jurisdiction. And now I had the proof. That week, I published a personal blog post, public, but written as a factual statement, not an accusation. I titled it, "When a Neighborhood Becomes a Threat, a Case Study in Overreach." It described in precise architectural and legal language how an HOA had attempted to falsely claim jurisdiction over a private lot and intimidate its owner into submission. I attached GIS screenshots, parcel history, and noted that video documentation exists and will be made available if legal proceedings escalate. By morning, it had over 2,000 views. 2 local journalists contacted me. One of them recognized Karen's name. Apparently, she'd tried something similar before. Different state, different HOA, same pattern. Now the pieces were lining up. I wasn't just dealing with a power-tripping suburban tyrant. I was dealing with a professional manipulator, and she'd just left her fingerprints all over my property. I left town for 48 hours to meet a client in Denver. Short flight, long lecture about restraint in material palettes, and I should have known that absence would be exactly the window they wanted. When I pulled up the drive, the sight felt like someone had reached into my head and shredded a private thought. A section of the low river birch hedge that framed the eastern walk had been torn out, roots flung like spilled ink across the gravel. My sculpted concrete steps, those I poured myself on a cold March morning, had scuff marks and boot prints across one riser. The small hand-built lantern at the gate, the one with the hidden camera inside, was gone. The koi pond's outer stone border had been pried loose and shifted. My private property sign lay in the grass, crumpled. It looked like someone had stomped a cigarette out on the corner. There were tire tracks through the soft bed where I'd planted dwarf rhododendrons last spring. I didn't walk. I moved with purpose and a lock-on focus that makes you feel dangerous in a way you've never wanted to be. The Bird Box cam, the one in the Japanese maple, had recorded the whole thing. On playback, 6 men in vests and work pants unloaded a flatbed pickup at 2 in the morning. One wore a jacket with a logo I recognized from a local landscaping company. Another had a clipboard. Then, like a choreographed assault, they unbolted the lantern, ripped the hedges, and started hauling stones into the truck. About 20 minutes into it, a woman in a windbreaker, Karen, strolled up, checks her phone for a moment, then nodded. She wasn't wearing gloves. She put a cigarette to her lip, watched, and waved one of the men over as if approving the view. There was an audacity to it that made bile rise in my throat. They weren't hiding. This was punishment disguised as work. They were making a point. I called the sheriff before I stepped out of the car. The deputy who answered had just come from a domestic noise call and wasn't thrilled, but he came. He and another officer walked the site with me. I handed over the playback, the clips already duplicated and time-stamped. The officer watched, jaw tightening, as the men dragged one of my cedar posts to the truck. When the playback showed Karen watching as they crushed the lantern and laughed, the deputy's face went flat. "This is criminal damage and theft," he said. "We'll take statements and get the serial numbers of any tools or equipment we can identify. Do you have a list of what's missing?" I rattled off the landscape lights, the lantern, one of my studio's portable welders, oddly specific, 3 custom handrail brackets, things you don't want to enumerate because they're part of your life's work. We walked the property line. There were boot impressions, clear tire treads, and a smear of hydraulic fluid near the koi pump. A neighbor across the ridge, Marta, an older woman who keeps a ridiculous number of wind chimes, came over in her slippers. She'd seen a truck with a partial plate number that night, a dealer plate from a rental outfit she'd used years ago. I made a note of everything. The deputy photographed the site, lodged the report, and assured me they'd canvass for witnesses and run the plate leads. He seemed sincere enough, but there's a particular slowness to bureaucracy that no amount of reassurance replaces. Back at the studio, I called Veronica. She was already 3 steps ahead of me in tone and in plan. File an emergency claim with your homeowner's insurance and request a forensic loss adjuster immediately, she said. Get an arborist to assess the root damage. Don't touch anything. Leave it as evidence. And Asher, get me every frame from those cameras. We'll prepare a criminal complaint and a civil demand notice. I want the guys' faces enlarged and redacted for the filing. I took inventory. I uploaded the camera frames into a secure drive with redundant off-site backups and labeled them with GPS coordinates. I texted Marta to ask if she could attend a neighbor deposition. Her eyewitness account about the partial plate might tie that rental truck back to a company used by the HOA contractors. She agreed, breathless and trembling with the moral outrage of someone who'd been quietly angry for years. The insurance adjuster showed up 2 days later, a woman with a kind voice and a clipboard, who walked the yard slowly and then made a sound somewhere between sympathy and the administrative indifference of a person who sees vandalism all the time. She took measurements, snapped photos, and requested quotes. I hired a landscape restoration team I'd used before. They brought me an itemized estimate that made my stomach drop. Tens of thousands for stonework, replanting, and the koi pond pump replacement. The forensic arborist pegged the cost of the hedges and the tree stress at a number that made me take off my glasses and rub my eyes. Meanwhile, Veronica filed the legal complaint, criminal charges for trespass, theft, and malicious destruction. She also sent a cease and desist letter to Aspen Gate HOA, demanding immediate cessation of any activity on my property and calling out the video by time code. She copied it to county attorneys and the local paper's city desk. The county attorney's office called back within the hour to ask for the footage. It turns out that once something looks like organized intimidation rather than a petty neighborhood spat, people, officials, get nervous. I found myself sitting on the stone bench by the koi, hands wrapped around a thermos, watching the surface of the water settle. The pond had always been a refuge, a quiet surface to catch the sky. That afternoon, it looked like a face I didn't recognize, bruised, disturbed. But beneath the water, the fish swam on, oblivious to the human theater above. It annoyed me in a way that felt like a moral imperative. Everything that lives through quiet will survive noise if you let it. I decided I wouldn't let them make this quiet uninhabitable. The local reporter arrived a day later. I showed her the footage. She took notes and photographs and asked pointed questions about the HOA's previous behavior. She didn't blink at the word forgery when I used it. Small-town news people have an appetite for local corruption. Within 24 hours, the paper ran a front-page piece with a tasteful photo of my damaged lantern and the headline, "Local Architect Alleges HOA-Backed Vandalism." Calls and messages rolled in. Support from colleagues, cautious offers of solidarity from neighbors who'd privately grumbled about Karen's heavy hand for years, and one anonymous tip calling Karen a serial abuser of governance. It felt like oxygen. At night, I stared at my camera's feeds and watched the property like a vigil. I thought of all the ways you can defend a house. Walls, locks, courts, attention. The last one, attention, had always been the least expensive and most effective measure. They'd thought they could intimidate me into silence. Instead, they'd invited every institution that hates lawlessness to their backyard barbecues. Veronica said she'd file a civil suit within the week to recover the cost of repairs and punitive damages for the malicious conduct. She wanted the complaint to include not just the damage, but the pattern, the eviction notice, the trespass, the measurements, the men at 2 a.m., Karen watching like a director. The chain would make sense on paper. Intent, action, consequence. And as I walked the property at dusk, checking the cameras and noting where the hedges would need replanting, I realized something else. There was a new rhythm here. Every time they tore a piece out, I'd plant two. Every time they tried to erase a sign, I'd replace it with something harder to rip down. Their violence felt improvised. My response could be deliberate. 3 days after the article hit the paper, the quiet around Aspen Gate broke. A call came in from a man with a gravelly voice who asked, "Is this about Karen Hatch?" I said yes. He gave only a first name, Doug, and told me he used to live in a different state, a different HOA. But the woman he dealt with was the same. Same name, same tactics, same forced fees, and fake jurisdiction plays. She tried to run us out, he said, called inspectors on us after we refused her beautification rules. We sued, settled. She resigned before the board got dismantled. Veronica took the call seriously. Within a day, she found court records sealed under a private mediation agreement, but enough metadata lingered. Same Karen Hatch, same behavior. That gave us a pattern. Enough to suggest intent. Karen, meanwhile, wasn't slowing down. Someone staked 2 fresh community easement, no trespassing signs along the border of my property. One even had the Aspen Gate logo, cheaply laminated and zip-tied to my oak fence. I took photos, removed them carefully with gloves, and handed them to the deputy with our active report. He raised an eyebrow. They're doubling down. The civil suit was filed that Friday. We included all footage, every time-stamped event, the quote estimates for damages, and Veronica's opening statement made it personal. My client's property has been systematically targeted by coordinated acts of harassment, trespass, and intimidation under the false pretense of HOA authority. This is not governance, it's coercion. And it worked. The local zoning board, perhaps eager to avoid scandal, issued a formal statement 2 days later. The parcel located at 112 Alder Ridge Road is not under any HOA jurisdiction. No annexation petitions have been filed. Any representations to the contrary are false and potentially fraudulent. That statement hit like a hammer. Local social media caught wind of it fast. Within hours, posts popped up from other residents, screenshots of passive-aggressive HOA letters, stories of fines for mailbox color violations, rumors about Karen intimidating elderly homeowners into voting her way. One anonymous post simply said, "She told us we'd lose resale value if we didn't back her fence project." Now I wonder what else she was lying about. Marta, my neighbor, dropped off cookies and said, "It's like someone lit a match under her chair. She's been driving around the neighborhood all morning, knocking on doors." By Monday, the HOA's own vice president resigned. A leaked email hit the press. He claimed he'd warned Karen to back off months ago, and that her vendetta was putting the board at risk of legal exposure. Suddenly, Karen wasn't the face of order. She was the face of a scandal. And the thing about people who build empires on fake rules, once the curtain lifts, even their allies scatter. It was Wednesday night when I heard the chime from my motion detector, one I had recently placed on the side gate, barely visible beneath a stone lantern in the garden. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the camera feed on my phone and saw 2 shadows slipping along the east wall of my house, one holding what looked like a measuring wheel, the other tapping away on a tablet. Both were dressed in black hoodies. One had a patch on the sleeve, HOA Patrol, or at least what passed for it in Karen's little kingdom. I didn't go outside. I just started recording. I watched as they crept toward the back patio and stopped by my studio entrance, my personal space with its glass walls and sliding cedar door. One of them crouched, pulled out what looked like a lockpick set, and got to work. They weren't subtle. 2 minutes later, the door was open, and they slipped inside. They didn't steal anything. That's what made it worse. They moved around the room slowly, scanning, photographing, whispering. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I caught enough on the hidden mic near the workbench. We just need to find one violation, any zoning violation. This isn't up to code. They were looking for a weapon, not a prize. I let them finish, let them leave. Then I called the sheriff. Deputies showed up in 15 minutes. I handed over all the footage, every still frame, the audio. One of them, Deputy Morales, took it more seriously than I expected. That's B&E. Doesn't matter if they didn't take anything. Intent to fabricate evidence? That's felony territory. They filed a criminal report on the spot. The next morning, Karen was waiting by her SUV across the street, arms folded, face tight with denial. She saw me walk out with 2 officers and a USB stick in hand. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. For once, she didn't either, but the retaliation came fast. By that afternoon, I received an email with the subject line, "Urgent, zoning violation compliance demand." Attached was a laughably amateur PDF citing fire code issues noise complaints, and community harmony violations. It bore the Aspen Gate logo, except it had a typo in the footer. Aspen Gate Neighborhood Council. Rookie mistake. Veronica almost laughed when I forwarded it to her. They're panicking. That's not just fake, it's sloppy. She filed a motion to introduce all footage and documentation into our civil suit. And now we had something better. Intent. Premeditated intrusion, fraudulent documentation, attempted fabrication of zoning code violations. The judge didn't just accept the motion, he issued a preliminary injunction against any further HOA communication with me until the hearing date. The next time Karen tried to contact me by sending a flyer through my mailbox, I had legal grounds to report her again. She was violating the injunction. That's the thing about bullies who hide behind fake rules. Once real rules hit back, they crumble fast. And crumble she did. The courthouse in Eagle County wasn't particularly grand, but that morning it felt like a cathedral. Clean stone steps, dull silver handrails, and a tension in the air so thick you could chew it. Veronica and I arrived early. I was dressed in a simple navy blazer, not flashy, just clean, tailored, professional. The courtroom itself was modest. A dozen wooden benches, a stiff old clock on the wall, and the state seal staring down from behind the judge's bench. I sat quietly while Veronica prepped our exhibits, every document lined up, color-coded tabs sticking out like teeth. Karen came in 15 minutes late. Hair perfectly curled, lips pressed so tightly they seemed to vanish. She wore a cream suit that probably cost more than a month of HOA dues, but her eyes flicked nervously toward our table the moment she entered. Two men followed behind, one her lawyer, the other I recognized from the video footage, the man with the tablet, who had broken into my studio. The judge was a no-nonsense man in his 60s, with that worn-down patience only seen in career civil servants. After preliminary remarks, he asked for opening statements. Karen's lawyer spoke first, trying to paint the HOA as a misunderstood organization just doing its civic duty to maintain community standards. My client only sought documentation, compliance, and peaceful integration, he said. I nearly snorted. Then it was Veronica's turn. Calm, razor sharp, she started with the basics. My ownership history, the deed, the fact that my land never once intersected with Aspen Gate HOA jurisdiction. Then she moved swiftly to the violations. The forged evacuation notice, the fabricated zoning complaints, the illegal entry into my property, the footage. She played the audio. The courtroom went silent. You could hear Karen's voice on the speaker saying, "He doesn't know this will all be under our control in a month." Then her accomplice laughing. The judge leaned forward. "You have the date stamp for this footage." Veronica nodded. "All metadata is included, also filed with the sheriff's office." Karen's lawyer turned pale. The man sitting next to Karen suddenly avoided eye contact. Then came the knockout. Veronica introduced the final exhibit, court records from California. Past HOA misconduct, formal censures, one civil suit for harassment, dismissed in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. But it was enough to establish a pattern of behavior. Karen stood up. "Objection, irrelevant and prejudicial." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. This goes to character, motive, and intent." Then he turned to her directly. "Ms. Montrose, did you at any point falsify a notice of eviction or direct members of your association to trespass and document code violations on property outside your jurisdiction?" Her lawyer leaned in, whispering. Karen said nothing. The silence was damning. The judge didn't declare a verdict yet. It was a preliminary hearing. But he didn't need to. He granted our request for an emergency injunction. The Aspen Gate HOA was formally barred from interacting with me or my property in any way until the full hearing. He also referred the evidence for criminal investigation. Karen left the courtroom shaking. Back outside, a reporter from the local paper was waiting. I didn't give a statement. Veronica did, though, brief and clinical. "We're confident justice will be served. No further comment." That night, I sat on my deck, looking over the lights of the valley below. My house had never felt more mine. 3 weeks later, I stood once again before the same courtroom. This time it was full. Neighbors, journalists, even 2 deputies from the sheriff's office had taken seats in the back row. Word had spread about the footage, the lawsuit, and about Karen. Veronica stood beside me, folders in hand, calm as a glacier. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I didn't need to. Karen entered, looking different this time. Gone was the sharp white suit and confident stride. She wore a dark blazer, minimal makeup, and the look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer had changed too. A new face, older, more serious, like they'd called in reinforcements. The trial lasted 2 days. Veronica walked the court through everything: the timeline, the deed, the footage, the threats, the forged document, the attempt to extort me into joining a HOA that I was never under. She called in a zoning official who confirmed my permits and boundaries. A representative from the county recorder's office testified that my parcel had never been part of Aspen Gates subdivision, never, not even in early drafts. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. A former board member of the HOA had come forward anonymously during discovery. Now he testified in court. He admitted that Karen had proposed a quiet expansion plan months earlier, targeting adjacent properties, hoping to bring them into the HOA by using intimidation, legal gray zones, and selective code enforcement. He said it plainly. She told us it would boost property values, and that people like Mr. Kenwood didn't belong in a luxury neighborhood unless they played by her rules. There it was. Motive, intent, pattern. Karen's defense tried to paint it all as a misunderstanding, a procedural overreach. But the judge wasn't buying it. He listed the charges clearly: criminal trespass, falsification of public documents, defamation, harassment, and attempted coercion under civil racketeering statutes. And then he delivered the final ruling. Karen was sentenced to 3 years in prison, citing prior misconduct as an aggravating factor. 2 of her associates were fined and barred from serving on any HOA boards for life. Aspen Gate HOA was dissolved. Its board was disbanded. Its accounts frozen pending federal investigation into misuse of funds. Every action they had taken against me was nullified, legally expunged. The courtroom broke into quiet murmurs. A few people even clapped. I didn't. I just nodded. After the ruling, Veronica handed me a document, an order for restitution. Karen was to personally pay me $215,000 in damages, enough to cover legal fees, emotional distress, and punitive compensation. I signed it, not for the money, for the principle. A week later, I installed a new gate, sleek steel, matte black. Above it, I hung a sign: home of a poor artist, richer than Karen. 2 days after that, a man I didn't recognize came to the edge of my driveway. Older, tall, denim jacket. He stood awkwardly before finally speaking. "You're Kenwood." I nodded. "I used to be on the HOA. I voted for the expansion plan. Back then, I thought it made sense. Raise property values, make the place more exclusive. But after watching what she did to you, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You built a hell of a place here." I looked at him for a second, then gestured to the porch. "Come have some tea. Just one condition." He smiled. "No Karen? No Karen." We sat on the porch as the Colorado sun dipped below the trees, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was home again. Not just in a building, but in a place where I belonged. On my terms, in my name, without permission.